Something lurks in the shadows, waiting to strike. From abandoned parks to haunted woods, these 6 thrilling stories will make you question what hides in the dark and who's watching just beyond the light. Stay until the end, if you dare. Let the horror begin. The first story: I was hunted by Slender Man in a forest. I should have never gone hiking alone. It was supposed to be a thrilling adventure, a solo journey through one of the densest forests I'd ever heard of. The locals said it was a place people went missing, a place full of dark secrets and chilling legends, and I went anyway. But what I didn't know was that I'd be hunted by something not human. It was early in the morning when I set off, my backpack full of supplies and my heart full of excitement. I'd read about this forest online, hundreds of acres of wilderness, untouched for decades. There were warnings too, stories about people hearing voices, seeing things that weren't really there. I shrugged them off, chalking it all up to local superstition. I wasn't scared, not yet. I planned to follow a hidden trail, something not on the map, a path I had to find on my own. That's what excited me, exploring the unexplored. But as I ventured further, the deeper I got, the more wrong everything felt. The deeper I walked, the quieter everything became. It was like the forest had swallowed all sound. And then I saw them, strange symbols, almost like runes, carved into the bark of the trees. At first they seemed random, but as I moved forward, they grew more intricate, more intentional, like they were trying to tell me something. Then came the shadows, long, unnaturally stretched, like arms reaching across the ground, even when the light didn't make sense. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. And then I heard it, whispering, soft, like someone calling my name, but from far away. I stopped in my tracks, spinning around, searching for the source. But there was nothing but the endless trees. I kept moving, picking up my pace, feeling an uneasy tightness in my chest. It felt like someone was watching me. No matter how much I tried to brush it off, I couldn't shake the feeling. And then I saw it. At first, just a shadow among the trees, a figure so tall it made the branches look small. A figure with no face, just smooth, pale nothingness. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but when I looked back, it was gone. My heart pounded, the sound of blood rushing in my ears, and I started to wonder if the legends were more than just stories. But I told myself to calm down. It was all in my head, right? The whispers grew louder. This time, it wasn't just one voice. It was many, overlapping, taunting, calling my name again and again. And then I heard footsteps. At first, they matched mine, but then they sped up, closing the distance. I looked back, and there it was again, the figure, closer, clearer, moving towards me. I could feel it staring at me, even without a face. And that's when I realized I was being hunted. Panic set in. I ran, darting between trees, looking for any path that would lead me out, but the forest was like a maze. Every turn led to thicker branches, twisted roots, and darkness. The tall figure followed, always just far enough away to keep me running, but never enough to let me escape. Eventually, I tripped, falling face first onto the forest floor. I scrambled to get up, but my legs felt like lead, and then I looked up and saw it towering over me. Its body seemed to stretch impossibly tall, bending in ways that defied logic. I could feel its presence, like it was staring right through me. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It just loomed over me, casting a shadow that felt like it could swallow me whole. And in that moment, I felt like I was slipping away, like my very mind was being pulled into the darkness behind its faceless stare. But just as I felt like I was about to lose myself, the ground gave way beneath me, and I tumbled down a steep hill, rolling and crashing through bushes and branches until I hit a clearing. It was like the forest let me go. Without thinking, I got up and ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was at the edge of the forest, my chest heaving, my body shaking with adrenaline and fear. I don't know why it let me go. I don't know what it wanted, but I do know one thing. That figure, that faceless thing, it's still out there. And if you ever find yourself alone in the woods, feeling like you're being watched, run, and don't look back, because you might just be right. The next story, Voices in the Dark, Slender Man's Call from the Shadows. I never believed in urban legends or ghost stories, at least not until I worked the night shift at the old hospital, alone, every single night. I thought it would be an easy gig, sitting behind a desk, watching over a building that's been empty for decades. But the voices, the whispers that knew my name, they proved I wasn't alone. Something was there with me, something not human. The hospital was built back in the 1940s, a mental institution that had long since fallen into disrepair. My job was simple: watch over it, make sure no one broke in, and report anything unusual. Easy, right? The pay was decent, and at first, I didn't mind the eerie surroundings. The place had character. Sure, the halls were lined with peeling paint, and sometimes a gust of wind would make the doors creak, but it was all just background noise, until it wasn't. One night, I sat in the control room, my eyes on the security monitors. It was a quiet shift, and I found myself dozing off. That's when I heard it, like a distant echo through the static of the radio. A whisper. At first I thought it was just interference, but it was too clear, and it said my name. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. Silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I glanced at the monitors, trying to catch any movement in the halls. Nothing. The radio crackled again, and this time I heard more. A faint voice whispering my name, drawn out, almost like a breath. "Come." Closer. I froze. My hand hovered over the radio, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a prank, but who would be out here in the middle of the night? And how did they know my name? The whisper was so soft, so familiar, it felt like it was inside my head, slipping into my thoughts like a poison. I switched the radio off, but the voice, my name, was still there. I checked the monitors again, my hands trembling, and that's when I saw it, a figure, just standing at the far end of one of the long corridors. Tall, impossibly tall, with unnaturally long limbs, standing perfectly still. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a trick of the poor quality camera, but then it moved, just slightly, like a shiver through the darkness, and then it was gone. I leaned in closer, rewinding the footage, but every time I paused, there was nothing there. But I knew what I saw, and it felt like it was looking right back at me. I tried to shake it off, but the whispers, they didn't stop. They got louder, clearer, and now they were telling me things I hadn't heard in years. Secrets from my childhood, thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. I couldn't understand how or why, but the voice knew everything about me, and it wanted me to follow it. I grabbed my flashlight and left the control room, my heart pounding. The corridors seemed darker than before, stretching into an endless void. I told myself it was just my imagination, but with every step, I felt like I was being pulled somewhere, like I was no longer in control. I followed the whispers deeper into the hospital, to a part of the building I'd never been to. The lights flickered above me, and as I turned the corner, there it was. Standing in the middle of the corridor was a figure, a man, if you could call it that. Faceless, tall. Its arms were impossibly long, reaching down past its knees, and its head, smooth, featureless, like a blank canvas. I couldn't look away, and then it started moving toward me, slowly, silently, like it was gliding over the floor. The whispers in my head turned to screams, urging me to run, but I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as it drew closer, its featureless face inches away from mine. Somehow, in a moment of pure desperation, I broke free from whatever force held me, and I ran. I ran like my life depended on it, the screams still echoing in my head, the dark hallways stretching endlessly in front of me. I could feel the presence of that thing behind me, its tall shadow creeping along the walls. I don't remember how long I ran, but when I finally burst out of the front doors, into the cold night air, the whispers stopped. Everything went silent. But the fear, the terror, it stayed. The next day, I quit the job, never went back. But every now and then, when it's quiet, when the world falls silent, I can still hear it. That whisper, my name, calling me back to the darkness. The next story, the whispering mirror. I accidentally summoned Slender Man. It was supposed to be just a quirky antique, an old mirror full of character and mystery. I never thought I'd bring home something cursed. But when the whispering started, when I realized I had summoned something I couldn't escape, well, let's just say, some reflections should stay unseen. I found the mirror at a yard sale. It was beautiful, ornate, with an elaborate wooden frame, and so tall it nearly reached the ceiling. The woman selling it had an odd look in her eye, like she was relieved to be getting rid of it. "It's got a history," she warned. "Some say it's haunted. You might hear things coming from it." I laughed it off. Just superstitions, right? The mirror looked perfect in my living room. It made the space feel bigger, almost like there was a whole other world hidden within its glass. For the first few days, it was just another piece of furniture. But then, I started hearing whispers, soft, barely audible, like a breath on the back of my neck when the room was empty. It happened late at night, when everything was quiet. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe my mind playing tricks on me. But then the whispers became clearer, a voice, software ghostly, calling my name. "Is someone there?" I would call out, but the only answer was my own echo. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, that behind that mirror's surface, something was alive. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing, but the voice knew things only I knew, memories I hadn't thought about in years, secrets I'd never spoken aloud. It felt like someone was standing right behind me, whispering into my ear. And when I would turn around, the only thing there was the mirror, reflecting my own frightened face. One night, I had enough. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. I was consumed by those whispers. In a fit of desperation, I tore the cloth covering off the mirror, determined to confront whatever it was. I stared into the reflection, waiting for something. And then I saw it. A tall figure standing behind me, so tall its head almost touched the ceiling. It was just there, faceless and still, like a shadow that didn't belong. I spun around, but the room was empty. I looked back into the mirror, and it was still there, standing closer now, almost like it was trying to reach out of the glass, its unnaturally long arms stretching toward me. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away, but the whispers grew louder, echoing around the room, repeating my name over and over. "Come closer," it whispered, like a taunt. "Come closer." The figure's head tilted unnaturally, and its featureless face seemed to be staring right at me, like it could see through my very soul. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. But I could feel it, the presence of something inhuman, something that didn't belong in this world. The mirror wasn't just reflecting, it was a doorway, and whatever was on the other side wanted out. I knew I had to end it. The whispers were driving me mad. I grabbed a hammer from the garage, my hands shaking as I approached the mirror. Its surface seemed to ripple like water, distorting my reflection as I got closer. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, raising the hammer high above my head. And that's when the figure pressed its face against the glass, cracking it from the inside. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the mirror, and the whispers turned to screams, angry, inhuman screams. I brought the hammer down with all my strength, shattering the mirror into countless pieces. But instead of stopping the nightmare, I made it worse. The darkness poured out of the shattered glass, swallowing the room in shadow. And the figure, tall, faceless, and horrifyingly real, stepped through. The mirror was gone, but the whispers never stopped. Every piece of shattered glass reflected that figure, its blank face staring at me from every angle. I could feel it in the room, even when I closed my eyes, standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. I don't know what I summoned, or how, but I know this. There are some things you can't escape. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And every night, when I hear that soft, ghostly whisper calling my name, I remember that reflection, staring back at me, pulling me into a nightmare I can never wake up from. The next story, my night shift, became a nightmare. Slender Man was watching. Working the night shift as a security guard always seemed like an easy job. A quiet building, a few patrols, and hours to kill. At least, that's what I thought. But when I saw that figure watching me on the cameras, always closer, always watching, that's when I realized my night shift had turned into a nightmare. I worked the night shift at a massive, isolated building, far from any main roads, surrounded by empty fields. It was the perfect job for someone who liked being alone, or so I thought. My duties were simple: patrol the place, check the cameras, and make sure no one was trespassing. Easy, right? For the first few nights, I didn't mind the isolation. In fact, I enjoyed it. The building had a kind of eerie beauty to it. The long hallways stretched out into the darkness, and the silence was comforting, like a blanket that wrapped around you. But there was something about that silence, something that felt wrong, like it was hiding something. One night, as I was making my rounds, I heard footsteps, soft, almost like bare feet on concrete, just a few steps behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. But there was no one there, just shadows dancing on the walls, stretching further than they should. Brushing it off as nerves, I went back to the control room and sat down to check the cameras. And that's when I noticed it. The screens were flickering, static, rippling through the feed like something was interfering. Then, in one frame, just for a split second, I saw it. A figure, tall, unnaturally thin, standing still at the far end of a corridor. I blinked, and it was gone. I leaned in closer to the screens, trying to find that figure again. Maybe it was just a shadow, or my tired eyes playing tricks on me. But as I cycled through the cameras, it appeared again. A tall, faceless figure, standing perfectly still. And each time I saw it, it was closer. First in the hallway, then just outside the door, and then right behind me. I turned around so fast I nearly knocked my chair over, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room, the hum of the cameras, and the feeling of eyes on me. Eyes that weren't really there. I knew I had to confront whatever it was. Maybe it was a prank, maybe someone had broken in, or maybe it was something worse. I left the control room, flashlight in hand, my heart pounding with every step. The hallways seemed to stretch endlessly, and the darkness felt like it was closing in around me. The footsteps were louder now, like they were echoing in the walls, surrounding me. And that's when I saw him, standing at the end of the hallway, arms impossibly long, body stretching like it was made of shadows. Faceless, motionless, but watching. always watching. Fear took over, and I ran. I don't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to get out of that hallway, out of that building. Every corner I turned felt like it led to nowhere, the hallways shifting and twisting like a maze. And every time I looked back, the figure was there, closer, moving without moving, like it was gliding across the floor. Finally, I found the door, the exit to the outside world. I threw it open and stumbled into the night air, my breath coming in ragged gasps. When I turned back to the building, it was dark, silent, empty. I quit the job the very next day. I told my boss I couldn't handle the isolation, that I needed to be around people. But I didn't tell him about the figure. I didn't tell anyone, because who would believe me? Even now I can't shake that feeling of being watched. I still see that figure in my dreams, standing at the edge of the darkness, tall and faceless. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I hear those footsteps, coming closer, always following. The next story, Slender Man's Game, the night I played with shadows. I've always loved urban exploration, the thrill of sneaking into abandoned places and finding secrets hidden in the dark. So when I got an email inviting me to play a game at an old amusement park, I thought it was a joke. But the prize was real, and the challenge sounded too good to pass up. But what I didn't know was that it was more than just a game. It was a trap, and the rules were set by something not human. The email came with the subject line, "Do you dare to play?" The message was simple, an address to an old abandoned amusement park, and a promise of a large prize for anyone who could complete the game's challenges. Despite feeling a little uneasy, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to go, excited for the thrill of exploring a creepy, forgotten place. When I arrived, the amusement park looked like something out of a horror movie. Rusted roller coasters, broken down rides, and booths filled with tattered prize toys all stood frozen in time. And there was something else, a chilling stillness, like the whole place was holding its breath. The email had mentioned challenges, and the first one came through my phone as a cryptic text. Find the carousel horse with no eyes. Laughing it off as part of the game, I made my way deeper into the park, weaving between the skeletal remains of rides and stands. But the deeper I went, the more unsettling the place felt. Shadows stretched and shifted around me, moving in ways that didn't match the dim light of my flashlight. After some searching, I found the carousel, its horses faded and chipped, and in the center, one horse, completely eyeless. The moment I touched it, my phone buzzed. Good, now find the Ferris wheel cabin that creaks. The game was on, but the air felt heavier, like I wasn't alone. As I moved toward the Ferris wheel, I started to feel like I was being watched. I brushed it off, thinking it was just nerves. But when I reached the creaking cabin, I looked up and saw it, standing at the top of the Ferris wheel, silhouetted against the moonlight. A tall, faceless figure, its unnaturally long arms stretched along the beams. My phone buzzed again. Tag, you're it. A wave of panic hit me as I realized that this wasn't just some harmless scavenger hunt. The figure moved, silently and impossibly, from the top of the Ferris wheel to the ground, disappearing into the shadows. And that's when the lights flickered on, the park coming to life with power that shouldn't exist. The old lights of the rides flashed and spun as if the park had woken up, and the music of old carnival tunes echoed through the air. I ran, darting between booths and ducking behind rides, trying to get away from whatever was out there. But the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, stretching across the ground, bending like long, thin fingers, trying to grasp at my feet. Slender Man was never fully in sight, but always just out of reach, an arm peeking around a corner, a tall silhouette sliding behind a roller coaster. My phone buzzed constantly, each new message a taunt. Getting tired? You can't hide. Desperate to find a way out, I stumbled into a structure labeled Hall of Mirrors. Inside, the glass panes were cracked and dusty, reflecting 1,000 distorted versions of myself. The whispers started, soft, indecipherable, like a dozen voices speaking in unison. And in the mirrors, I saw him. Slender Man's figure wasn't just behind me. It was in every reflection, closer each time I blinked. I tried to smash the mirrors, break through the glass, but it was like I was trapped in an endless maze. Every turn led to another reflection, another glimpse of that tall, faceless figure standing just an inch away. In a moment of pure adrenaline, I broke through the exit and stumbled back into the open, the whispers finally stopping. The amusement park stood still once more, silent and dark, as if nothing had ever happened. My phone buzzed one last time, a message appearing on the screen. You win, for now. I ran, leaving the park behind, but the feeling of being watched never went away. And sometimes, late at night, when I check my phone, I see new messages, ones I never asked for, inviting me back to play. One more time. The next story, The Slender Man. Phone call, a voice from the void. It started with just a phone call. Late at night, an unknown number flashing on my screen. At first, I thought it was a prank, just some anonymous troll. But when I finally picked up, that's when the real horror began. The voice knew everything about me, and it was leading me somewhere I never wanted to go. It was around midnight when I got the first call. Blocked number flashed across my screen, and I instinctively ignored it. But then the calls kept coming, every night at the same time, like clockwork. And each time, I watched the phone buzz, curiosity pulling me to answer, but a sense of dread keeping me from it. One night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Irritated and half asleep, I answered, expecting a prank or some scam, but all I heard was static, and then faint breathing. No words, just the sound of something, breathing on the other end. I hung up quickly, but the calls didn't stop. Each night, they got stranger. At first, it was just heavy breathing, but soon, I started to hear whispers, soft, ghostly, like a voice far away. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but then the whispers changed. They started saying things about me. The voice would repeat my name, my address, and secrets I'd never told anyone. It felt like someone was watching me, listening to my every thought, and I had no idea how or why. The worst part was the voice itself. It sounded like a hiss mixed with the wind, so quiet that I had to press the phone to my ear just to hear it. And no matter how hard I tried to make sense of the words, all I got were fragments that filled me with dread. Then one night, the call came with something new. Come, find me. The voice was clearer than ever, a deep, distorted whisper that sent chills down my spine. And then my phone buzzed with a text message. If you want to know who I am, come to the woods. A location pin dropped, showing a spot deep in the forest at the edge of town. Every instinct told me not to go, but something about the voice, the message, it felt like a challenge, one I couldn't ignore. So I grabbed a flashlight, threw on a jacket, and headed out to the woods. The night was cold, silent, with the kind of silence that felt like it was hiding something. The deeper I went into the woods, the more uneasy I felt. My phone kept buzzing, silent calls from the blocked number, filled with static and that familiar breathing. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure that someone was watching me, just out of sight. The trees seemed to close in around me, and the air grew heavy with tension. And then I saw it. At first, it was just a shadow moving between the trees, far too tall, far too thin to be human. I stopped, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and that's when I heard the voice again, this time all around me, carried by the wind. You're close. So close. Suddenly my phone went dead, the screen flashing with static before going completely black. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, and I looked up, and there it was. Just a few feet away stood a figure, taller than any human, its limbs unnaturally long, its faceless head tilting slightly, as if it were studying me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the whole world had gone still, like I was trapped in a nightmare. The figure didn't speak, didn't move, just loomed over me, its presence suffocating, like a shadow that couldn't be escaped. In a rush of panic, I turned and ran, my feet barely finding the ground as I sprinted through the woods. The shadows twisted and warped around me, and every time I looked back, I saw that tall figure gliding through the darkness, always just out of reach. I didn't stop running until I was back home, slamming the door shut behind me and sinking to the floor, gasping for breath. My phone lay on the ground, silent, still. But even now, I know it's not over. I still hear the static sometimes, faint whispers in the dead of night. And every time my phone rings, I fear it's him, calling me back to the woods. Thank you for listening to these chilling stories. If you enjoyed the fright, please like and subscribe for more horror tales, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out.